Hello, and today we're going to be talking about this magnificent jacket that I purchased at a thrift store and have repurposed with these amazing crochet sleeves. Now, I'm going to show you a tutorial on how to attach the sleeves to the denim. I'm not going to show you a tutorial on how to make the sleeves because there's like a million different ways to make them. But I will show you. Now, I was fortunate that I picked up denim jackets that were already turned into vests, so I did not have to cut the sleeves off. But if you use an X-Acto knife and follow the process, I'll link the video that I share cutting the sleeves off of the sweatshirt. It would work pretty much the same way. So you could just cut the sleeves off if you aren't lucky enough to find one that's already made into a vest. And then we're going to do a little tutorial on how to attach the sleeves once they are already made. Now, a couple of things before I jump into that. The hard part, if you've kind of seen some of the videos on this already, that I had was selecting the yarn and the stitch pattern. Now that's just more creative process than anything. I wanted a yarn that I already had in my stash, so I needed to make sure that I had enough of it. And for the two sleeves, I used approximately 180 grams for the length that I wanted to have them. Now, if you want longer sleeves, you're going to need more. If you want shorter sleeves, you don't need as much. But you will need, for this length, which is a small, so it's about a 20, I don't remember. Here, Farah, thank you. That long, then you will want to make sure that you have about 180 grams. It also sort of depends on what stitch pattern you're using. This is a basic, sort of a lacy kind of alternating shell with, I don't know what the actual name is. I can't really give you that, unfortunately. But if you want to do a lacy, if you want to do granny square, whatever it is, the key is that you want to make sure that you measure around the sleeve to find out what that circumference is. And then when you create your pattern, you want to make sure that it is going to, if you do it in the round, which I did with these, then the circumference should be about that. If you're going to do it flat and then seam it, then flat, the length should be about that. So however that works. And then, yeah, just kind of go from there. Now you can use granny squares. You can do a granny stitch like I did with the sweatshirt. You can use just about any weight yarn that you want. I did not add additional sort of cuffs to this. I kind of left it as more of a flared sleeve. Whereas with this one, I did add the cuffs and I kind of gave it more of a tapered sleeve. So there's all kinds of different things that you can experiment with and just have fun. And trust me, if you go to your local thrift store, they're going to have plenty of denim jackets. So give some denim some new purpose. Now, are you ready to find out how I attach the sleeves? I've seen some videos on these where they attach the sleeves and then work into the jacket. I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to have to constantly be moving the jacket around. So I made the sleeves in their entirety and then attached them after they were already complete. So let's jump over. Hopefully this video works for you and shares with you a little bit about how to attach your own sleeves and make your own amazing denim jacket. Get it repurposed. Don't you love my new model? I picked her up on Facebook Marketplace for like 30 bucks. And have something that's totally one of a kind. Okay, so to mark the sleeves on our denim jacket, we're first going to want to turn the jacket inside out. And then there's a few things that we're going to need to complete this process. And let's show you what those are. First of all, we're going to need some sort of chalk. Chalk or a marker is fine, but the chalk at least washes off later. You'll need a ruler. You will also need I use a fine weight yarn. I found that actually works better than thread because it's heavier and hardier. Then you're also going to need 2 needles. One is going to be a very fine needle. Not too fine though. You want to be able to get the fine weight yarn through the hole. So if you find it handy, I would use this. And I also need to use these, my spectacles. And then you're also going to want a crochet needle, and that is for actually stitching your completed sleeve on. Now, in addition, this can be handy for getting some of those needles started, and then having some stitch markers to mark where you're going to put the sleeve on helps you just kind of stay in the right pattern. So let's go ahead and start marking the sleeves. So I'm going to get my jacket here, and I start in the armpit. That's really where you want to start because that's going to hide the most obnoxious kind of errors or bumps or anything like that that you might have. Grab your ruler and your chalk, and literally you're just going to measure about every 1/2 inch. This side works better, and just give it a little notch right there. So about every 1/2 inch. Doesn't have to be precise, but it should be pretty close. And you do this going all the way around. So I'm going to do that, and I will meet you back at the start. Okay, now we have all of those marks done all the way around, and we're going to come back here to the armpit, and we're going to first set that aside for just a second because this is the tricky part. We are going to get this threaded onto the needle. So I will spare you the torture of that and be right back once I get this sucker on. And here we go. So one thing you are going to need that I did not grab, you are going to need some scissors. Make sure that you have, basically my kind of rule of thumb on this is to have about 2 to 2.5 times around. So if the area that you need to sew is 22 inches, as it is in this case, then you're going to want at least 44 inches. So just kind of measure the amount you need off and then cut that off. And once you have your yarn ready to go, you can just kind of take the end and do a little bit of a double knot. Although this isn't terribly important because I'll show you why in a sec, it just helps just a little bit. Okay, now bring our jacket over here. Find the armpit, and there's a little bit of tricky maneuvering here so you can see everything. Now we are going to go into this area right in here, and we're going to probably need our thimble to kind of push through a little bit. So we just take the needle and go right up. The idea here is that we do not want to go through the other side. we want to keep it inside in this fold. And we're going to kind of come up here and using the thimble so you don't hurt your fingers, push it up into. Now you can see I went up high, and I don't really want that because it will end up showing on the outside. So we want it to stay kind of between these two stitches. That's really the key there, is keeping it between those two stitches. And then we pull it through. Now here's where that knot is going to help you just a little bit. Is if you're pulling this through, it's going to snag there. It's not going to carry through. Now what I do is I give this an additional tie right here just for a little bit more stability and security. And because when I go to tie it off at the end, then I can use this to tie it off as well. Now this part is, you can still use the thimble, but it's not quite as necessary. Now we're going to do what's called a blanket stitch all the way around. And this just allows for a little bit of security and structure in what we're doing so that they don't pull out. I'm left-handed, so I'm going to try and maneuver this around so that you can see this a little bit better and how I'm working with this. Now, I do want to leave this tail out because I want to work with it at the end, but we're basically going to keep the yarn or the string or thread, whatever you want to call it, up, and we're going to do all the way around, we're going to do that stitch. So we go up and then back, and yeah, you might sometimes need, this one's a little thicker section here, the thimble to push through. And then once you get that far, make sure that this stays behind the needle. And then you pull it up. Might need a rubber grip for that. There we go. Get that through. And you can see as it's about ready to kind of pull through that the yarn goes around the stitch there. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for it to go around the stitch. So all the way around, we're going to do that. I'll show you a few more. Once you do a couple, it gets a lot easier. And it's really on those seam areas that it's the toughest to get through. So there you got another one. String up. And we'll do that all the way around. Nope, don't want it there. That's probably why it was so hard to get through. All right, I will meet you back around. Okay, so here I am telling you that I'm left-handed when in fact I'm actually fairly ambidextrous and ended up doing this all the way around with my right hand. So let's go ahead and finish this off. Get those last couple in. As I kind of come around there, This last stitch, I actually want to do on the inside of this first stitch so that it kind of does a double layer there. And that's just a little bit of extra security. Even though it's a little bit of a farther kind of run there, it's not much of a further run. And then what we're going to do, put our needle down, and we're going to tie this off really snugly. Because this stitch is the base for crocheting the sleeve on. And I'm really bad at keeping this in the center for you guys. So I'm going to try and keep doing that a little bit better. Then you can snip that off. All of that extra. So what we're going to do now is we are going to temporarily attach our sleeve to the jacket. Now, you'll notice that I left a little bit on at the bottom, and that's just so that I can do another round if I find that I need to for length for whatever reason, because while I measured it and I think that it's precise, I always like my backup to have just a little bit of extra yarn here for security's purposes. So we're going to take that sleeve wherever we seamed it, or if you did it in the round, just wherever it first started, so that we're going to take that and we're going to put that in the armpit, and that's going to be the beginning. So what I do is I use the little pins, if I can get one here, and join them at the beginning, so I know where that starting point is. And then I take the opposite side of the sleeve and figure out where the very top is going to be and attach the opposite side up there. This just allows you so that as you're going around, you don't get too far off track. That's really hard to get into. Hold on. You stay fairly consistent, keeping the uniformity all the way around. Then, in addition to that, I grab the center point, sort of the quarter point, and pin those as well. All just to kind of keep that uniformity going around so you don't get too far off track. Because if you get to this point and you have a big gap, like too much, then you know that you're not staying consistent overall with the stitching. So that's just kind of a little cheater helper to make sure that as you go around, you are staying pretty consistent. And then one more pin on this side. You can certainly add more of these if you are really concerned about that. I find that 4 is enough for me and good to go. Okay, so now we have those pinned on, and if you didn't remember to, and it matters, this pattern, it does not really matter. The stitch looks the same on the right side and the wrong side, even where it's joined. It doesn't really look that much different. So I'm not too terribly concerned with the inside versus the outside. But if you look at yours, however you did your sleeves, if it matters, make sure you turn them inside out before you do this. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to find that yarn that complements. It doesn't have to be the exact same yarn. This is not the same yarn as this, but it is the same as this. So it just has to look similar in case at any point in time your sleeve sort of comes and peeks through there, you want that to look very similar. Just a little security. So I'm using this one, and I'm using my big crochet needle. Now you can crochet these sleeves on if you don't like to stitch them on. I find that crocheting it on makes the seam here a little bit too bulky for my taste. So I prefer to stitch it on. Just my preference. Then we're going to go back to our armpit here. The armpit is the base of everything. Get all this extra goody stuff out of the way. And we're literally going to just start in that blanket stitch. Pull up some of your yarn. Whoops, sorry about that. Pull some of your yarn up. And then start blanket stitching this all the way around. And I'll show you how that kind of works out. So I'm going to go, because this is not attached right here, I'm actually going to go into both sections because that'll attach it. And then I can take this pin off because it's a little bit in the way. Set you aside there. And then just pull, pull, pull. I feel like as I'm sharing this with you, I sort of feel like the happy little tree guy from, I'm probably dating myself with that. Bob Ross. I think that's what his name was. Correct me if I'm wrong. Whoops. We've got a knot. Don't you love it when we get knots? Yeah, but my sharing this is pull, pull, pull. It's the happy little tree. So we are going to pull this tail almost all the way to the end here. And I'm going to tie this off to have it out of the way. Give it a good snug tug. And then find my needle. And at least now I can put this out of the way. And we are going to do 2 stitches into each one of these. Keeping in mind we want to have the right sort of tension so that this ends up right about here. So 2 stitches per section gives it a little bit more security and stability. And maybe I gave it a little bit too much tail. Now, as you do the 2 stitches, you can advance it if you want, or you can kind of do it in the same, but always make sure that you're catching at least 2 sections of yarn. So you can see here there's 1 and then 2. You always want to catch, can you see that? But as you go in, make sure that you're catching 2 strands of yarn at least. So whether you go in here or here, you don't want to get just the 1 strand, you want to get at least 2. You don't want to get too many either because then it gets too bunchy, but you certainly want to do at least 2 strands there. And this is just going around and around, so it's not a complicated stitch at all, nothing fancy that you have to remember. And just go up underneath that, and then into there, and pull. And of course, the longer your tail, the more you gotta pull. But Otherwise you end up having to add on more yarn, and you don't want to do that because that just gets messy and is less secure. So remember, you want to grab two strands of your sleeve at all times for more security and stability. And here I am doing it both left-handed and right-handed, so you can kind of see. Making sure that your tension is such that you stay in a line. All right, I think you have the gist of that. I will meet you back around. Okay, we're coming around to the end here, and one of the things you want to really make sure of is that, you know, nothing is pulled too tight or too loose in any certain areas, because that's going to really affect the way it looks once you turn it inside right. So, and then the other thing that you can do is, as you go around, slowly kind of just give this a little tug to tighten everything up. That way it's nice and snug and not too loose. And just finish off your next few stitches here. There are times when being ambidextrous is very beneficial. Now, I cannot crochet with my right hand, but things like this I can flip back and forth pretty easily. So that's really kind of nice. Just a few more stitches to go here. I'll make sure that stays out of our way. There's an old saying that fast is slow and slow is fast, and this is one of those times where that saying applies very well. The faster I go, the more these things get knotted up, and that takes me time to untangle, which then slows down the process. So it's a good reminder to me to just slow down. Because when I slow down, I can keep my hand in there and prevent it from tangling. But when I'm trying to go fast, I don't do that. Okay, so this is the last official stitch here. Now, I like to always do one more stitch right in that beginning, and that just kind of gives it a little extra security right in the armpit. Remembering to grab two things of yarn. I'm trying to get two here without making it too bulky. There we go. And then, once we finish that off, we can cut off a lot of this extra. We don't need quite as much anymore. Just makes it easier to work with. And then just tie these off. Nice and snug. And then what you can do is take these and weave them in. And once I do that, I will show you the finished product. Okay, so what did you think of that? Let me know in the comments below if you're going to try something like this. Different colors, different patterns. There's so much creativity that can go into making these. And yeah, this is just something that I'm really excited about. I had so much fun. Again, the hardest part was picking the colors and picking the stitch. But it works up really quickly once you have those two things figured out. So let me know if you're going to try something like this. And I can't wait to hear from you. Hey, Farah, take us out.